Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. In the last couple of years, this country has witnessed unprecedented exposure of acts of corruption and misgovernance, with leading politicians and their relatives cutting across party lines being at the center of them. The fact that so many cases have come out in the open is also partly related to the access ordinary people and the media have got to official documents and papers through the path-breaking legislation on right to information. Many of these cases of misgovernance or corruption in the recent past is related to land deals, even as the land rates keep soaring across the country. The hunger for land seems to have gripped this country, and it seems to have become a major source of problems facing the polity. On the other hand, the media, which has exposed many of these cases, has itself come under scrutiny for the way it has functioned. The relationship between the media and political class has also undergone transformation, many say for the worse. Big money and flexible morals seem to rule both politics and the media, leading to a situation which is causing serious concern. Has the political class in this country now become more morally flexible? Have they stopped setting standards? Is the media equally responsible for allowing this situation to deteriorate? Has corruption become an acceptable norm in this country? We will discuss all this today with Salman Khurshid, Union Minister for Law and Justice, who will be joining us very soon. And here in the studio with me is Bharat Bhushan, a senior journalist and editor of several newspapers in the past, and Professor Mridula Mukherjee, historian and professor in the Center for Historical Studies in the JNU. Welcome to all of you. Bharat, acceptable norms. Corruption has become an acceptable norm in this country. And when every new act of corruption comes into the open, we keep hearing that, sab kar rahe. Now the latest is the BJP president's, explanation. He felt very surprised that people were asking him the question as to how he could take equity from somebody whom he had given, contracts and things like that as a minister.
When you say corruption's become acceptable, it's become acceptable amongst whom? It's become acceptable perhaps amongst the elite, which itself is corrupt. You ask the ordinary person in the street and you ask him, do you accept corruption? He'll say no. There is an outrage in this country, and this outrage was shown even in Anna's agitation. What were people outraged about? They didn't accept corruption in public life. So corruption has not become acceptable. But our politics has become more corrupt.
And the politicians have started accepting this as a norm. You think so?
No, it's given in the nature of our politics. Our electoral system is corrupt. If you're going to spend, 3 to 4 crores in an election, where do you get this money from? You talked about land. So what land estate.
If you see in the last 2 years, several of these cases are related to land.
That's because all land transactions are only half in white,
right,
or 1/3 in white and rest in black.
Right.
Politicians park their black money in real estate, and before elections, they are again converted into black for spending in the elections.
Right.
So land, a scarce resource, is the source of all corruption in this country.
Okay, Professor Mukherjee, do you see it the way Bharat sees it, or the fact that corruption has become an issue? Is there, how do you look at it historically? Has this country accepted corruption as a norm throughout in the past also?
No, I don't.
Because, why I'm asking you this, the ordinary people, Bharat says that the ordinary people are, outraged and things like that. But the fact is that ordinary people even say, "Arey, sab chor hai," to kya ho sakta hai?
No, I would like to say that since you've asked me the question historically, and speaking as a historian, I think first of all I'd like to say that, when the British first came to India, and we have their accounts of what they saw, and because they recorded everything, one of the things which they were surprised by and impressed by was the honesty of the Indians.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is not something I'm cooking up. It's there in black and white. And contrasted to that was the conduct of the British East India Company and its officials, who officially were given the right to trade on their own account and thereby make money. They were given small sort of salaries, and there was a private account on which they could trade. And as you perhaps remember, the Governor-General himself, Warren Hastings, was so corrupt that he was impeached in the British Parliament.
Right.
This is all in the latter part of the 18th century. Now, by the end of the 18th century, once they became established as rulers, they were still on behalf of the company, but it became necessary now to have a different image. You could not have this rapacious companies, traders, you know. So then the reforms were put in place by Lord Cornwallis, the Indian Covenanted Service, which later became the Indian Civil Service, and their salaries were raised many-fold.
Okay.
The whole idea was that you should get so much money as your salary that it won't pay you to be corrupt.
You won't get tempted.
And private trading was banned.
Okay.
Okay. Now, they used to have an army of servants, 20, 30 acres of land, houses, royal lifestyle. Now, you could do that because you were a ruling race and you could exploit first Bengal and then the rest of India, and these kind of riches were available. You basically bought off the corrupt with a lot of money.
Yes.
So that's one part of our history. The other thing that I'd like to say is, and interestingly, in an article today in the Indian Express, Ashutosh Vashni, political scientist at MIT, has written more or less along the same lines, where he says that in the history of all countries, when they are going through this period, all or many countries, rapid industrialization in a rural society, and especially where land is a scarce resource.
Right.
And he gives examples that between the 1860s and the 1890s in the US, exactly this kind of corruption was rampant. He quotes one of the legislators, one of the businessmen, who says, I needed 5 legislatures to do my work, so I bought up all of them. Yeah. He talks about Tammany Hall, which was the city council of New York, where the politics was known to be rampantly corrupt, and where the concept of good corruption and bad corruption came. The guy defended himself saying, somewhat like Rajat Gupta, saying, well, I wasn't doing the dirty job like drugs and killing people and stuff like that. I only used to get to know from inside, where a bridge is coming up or where something, and I would quickly buy up all the land and then sell it at a higher price. And that was fair corruption, So we have to look at it historically as well.
So you're trying to say that, we are still a developing society, we are still a developing nation, we are still a young democratic nation. These are problems of growing up as and maturing as a democracy.
And therefore, we have to take them with this maturity. We have to look at the structural issues and bring in policy measures that prevent it, rather than getting just morally outraged, by Indians are corrupt.
We are joined now by the Union Minister for Law and Justice, Mr. Salman Khurshid. Welcome, Mr. Salman Khurshid. I think, Salman, you must have heard what Professor Mridula Mukherjee was just talking about. I am looking at, we have had several incidents in the past. In the recent past, you've also been in the picture. But I am trying to look at this issue in the larger context. Corruption as a phenomenon, it has hit politics. Now the media is also stung by it. There's a reverse sting on the media, and things are really looking. It seems to be a huge mess which we are in. But as both my guests in the studio, Bharat Bhushan and Mridula Mukherjee, were pointing out, especially Mridula Mukherjee, she says that corruption in this country was not there during the early British time and things like that. It was developed later, and now as a democratic nation, we are still young and we're in the process, and this is a passing phase. Do you think this is a passing phase?
Well, I sincerely hope that it's a passing phase. I don't think anyone can be so pessimistic about our country and our people, and indeed our culture, to think that this is part of our DNA and that this is here to stay forever.
Yes.
I just joined you when Professor Mridula Mukherjee was talking about the concepts of corruption and the nature of corruption in other developing societies long before we became a developing society.
Right.
The US, for instance, Ashutosh Varshney's work. And I do understand that there's a lot there which a lot of people don't seem to know has existed for a long time. And let me just say one thing, that we cannot really truly understand anything that's wrong with us unless we understand fundamentals of our society. And the fundamentals of our society we like to keep under wraps. Corruption is associated only with corruption in India, with corruption of money. A little bit like the British play, we are no sex please, we are British. There's a lot of other corruption in this country. There's corruption of sex. There's a corruption which involves violence, murder, crime, and we seem to think that corruption is contained and controlled, and it's just simply the quid pro quo corruption of money. That's something that we need to worry about. I think that's being extremely hypocritical and short-sighted and not actually addressing the fundamentals of our society.
Well, Salman, see, we were discussing just now, land has been the source of a lot of cases of corruption that we've been hearing in the past. Land is a scarce resource, soaring prices of land across the country, and everybody seems to be wanting to acquire more and more and more land. Isn't that a major cause of corruption? And also the need for regulating this land in this country?
Well, certainly, I think that this is as much a cause of corruption as horse stealing. Horse stealing was an element of crime in erstwhile England. The stealing of horse led to death penalty in England. So it must have been something very serious. Stealing horses must have been very serious. Now, as far as land issues are concerned, a disproportionate importance and value on land is something to do with the structure of our economy. So we should be addressing the structure of our economy and the economic institutions that we've developed, rather than just simply sitting there and saying, well, it's a bad thing that people fight over land and people go extra mile over land, or people use land as an instrument of power, or instrument of pelf, or instrument of whatever else you might want to call it.
Okay. We are joined now by Seshadri Chari, convener of the Foreign Affairs Cell of the BJP. Mr. Seshadri Chari, we are discussing corruption. We are discussing the corruption in politics as well as media. But coming to the way the flexible morals, don't you think that the political class today is showing more and more flexibility in its morals? They're not really setting standards for the people in this country.
I know, I just wanted to mention, you just, in the last segment, you mentioned something about land.
Yes.
See, land has always been a commodity for aggrandizement.
Right.
Otherwise, a person like Tolstoy wouldn't have written how much land does a man need.
Right.
So, land has always been there, land has been there, money has been there, political power has been there. And then winning election, first past the post system, whether you like it or not, that first past post the system has really given us certain advantages and certain disadvantages also. So when it comes to all these things, as you very rightly suggested, the casualty has been the morality of the person concerned. So when it comes to political morals,
yes,
we have a feeling that sab chalta hai, everything is okay, people will forget, public
right.
memory is short.
Right.
This is the kind of attitude that has grown over the period of time in the minds of the politicians.
Right.
So, there are two kinds of politicians, I would say. One who face the elections and then they are a public figure, and then those who are the backroom boys who don't have to face elections,
Right.
who are the ideological part of any party, whether it is Congress, Communist or BJP or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So there are two kinds of people. So there will always be divergent of opinion between these two sets of people.
Right. That's very interesting. Salman, do you agree with Seshadri Chari on that? You are a politician who has to go and fight
Of course.
elections on the ground, and you have colleagues in your party who
Yeah.
don't have to fight elections. And sometimes
I think this is true about all our parties.
And
I think
sometimes-
it's a very,
and
very
sometimes
sound judgment.
and sometimes
Yeah.
and sometimes you people who have to fight elections are forced to defend people who don't have to fight elections.
Completely agreed.
No. See, the defending is a completely different thing. Unfortunately, a lot of our defense is a mechanical defense. It's you have to stand up and defend right or wrong, your own side, because the other side attacks right or wrong. And I think that's a very sad commentary on Indian politics today, that we end up defending everything we do ourselves, and we end up attacking everything the other side does. Whereas the truth lies in between somewhere.
Absolutely,
There is
absolutely.
a little right and a little wrong in everyone. But we see it in black and white, no shades of grey, and that's destroying the political climate of our country. And I think this is going to be an extremely dangerous situation in the years to come if we don't put our act together and we don't sit down and work out the ground rules all over again. I'm not saying that you put a blanket over what any wrong anyone does, but the very concept of right and wrong, the concept of what you can tolerate and what you must not tolerate, I think this requires a transparent public debate and discussion, and then we move forward from there.
Okay, Bharat, both of them politicians, one who has never contested an election, another who has contested many elections and keeps, who will be contesting elections in future. I've been pretty frank in admitting what the problem is. How do you see their...
Well, I'm glad Salman is saying that all defense, political defense is mechanical, because he's been, I quite like him. I think he's an honest politician, but he's been defending all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
So was that just mechanical?
It
And
was
if standards have to be set,
apparently that seems
then people like him have to set standards, right? By not defending people mechanically, by saying what he's saying in your studio,
Right.
he should have said each time when he came out against all kind of criticism, saying that yes, you may be right, and you will not always be right, and I will not always be wrong. So let's have a bit of tolerance. So the onus is on the political class to build that atmosphere of tolerance, of saying that, look, we are not always right and the opposition is not always wrong. Let's find a via media. I mean, if this kind of discourse should be there consistently, it can't be just a one-off discourse.
Professor Mukherjee?
Yes.
Professor Mukherjee? See, what Salman says, that there has to be some kind of a debate discourse in this country, but do you think that such a discourse is possible in this present climate atmosphere, in this present political atmosphere in this country?
Well, I hope we don't have to stay in this atmosphere forever or for long. I think we have to come out of it.
Yes.
I think one of the things that's happening every day in front of our eyes is that everybody must realize that this game can be played by everyone.
Yes.
If it's attacking somebody in the Congress today, then it's BJP tomorrow, and other parties are not immune. So I think everybody will have to, for self-preservation, come up with a different kind of, culture. We have to build a new political culture in this country,
Mr. Sheshadri
where
Chari,
this is not,
Mr. Sheshadri
everything
Chari,
is not chalta hai.
okay, everything is not chalta hai. No, there's another serious issue which we need to discuss today. You have been a journalist yourself. You have been an editor of a magazine for a long time, and the media is now right under the scrutiny. You are in this unique situation where you are a politician. You're not really a politician like what we understand, but you have also been a journalist. How do you see the situation as far as the media is concerned? I mean, the latest instance of the Z News,
One of the
is something, a matter of serious concern. No, the relationship between the political class and the media, how do you see that?
No, what applies to the politicians also applies to the media. Because media, politicians, the system, the bureaucracy, the intellectuals, they're all part of the society. Some are in the periphery, some are in the background, some are in the foreground.
Right.
So it's only the positioning that they all have which is a little different. But that does not mean that one has to be above board and the other can be is slightly less as far as the standardization in society is concerned. But the biggest problem with any society at a given time is you get the kind of people that you sow. If
Right.
you have not given enough to the society by way of inculcating good culture, good habits,
Right.
if a political party has not done it, if a media house has not done it, if a bureaucratic institution has not done it, ultimately you will all suffer. The media will suffer, the politicians will suffer, the bureaucracy will suffer, and ultimately everyone will suffer because of somebody else's error.
Right.
So today, if one channel wants money to kill a particular news, this has happened in newspapers also. There is something called paid news.
Yes.
Now, killing a news for money is as bad as paid news.
Absolutely.
Publishing something for money. Both are equally bad. Now, why is it done? An industry, politician, media nexus.
Yeah.
So, this nexus has to be broken somewhere. Very unfortunately, we are all gripped with the kind of situation that we are all facing, and we want to solve something by today, 8:30 or 9 o'clock. We have to solve that issue and go for the next issue tomorrow morning.
Absolutely.
So I think all political parties, media should sit together and analyze the situation independently and objectively, and then come to some kind of a conclusion.
Mr. Salman Khurshid, you have been in the news recently for your, for what happened between you and the media. How do you see this in the larger context? Has the Indian political class not understood the latest dynamics of the media, the 24/7 news channels, the social media, the internet? Is the political class somewhere lagging behind in understanding the demands of the present day media?
Well, that doesn't need a lot of rocket science to say that. Of course, the political class has adjusted inadequately to 24/7 media. It's also adjusted inadequately to social media.
Right.
So we are not even talking about social media, because the average citizen is still subjected to the visual media and the print media in the normal course.
Right.
But frankly, I think that the media also needs to now wake up. It won't continue. This can't carry on. Media cannot rule without regulation. It cannot rule whether it's effective self-regulation or it's external regulation. These are matters for debate. These are matters to be substantiated, justified, factored into whatever the future has to be. But you can't have media that becomes the law into itself. And I think today the media, and you yourself today, have gathered here to discuss this because there is a serious concern of the responsibility that every public institution has to the people. And media is no exception.
Absolutely.
Media is also a public institution. It has a very respected place in our democracy and a very vital place in our democracy. But if democracy itself is getting hurt by a public institution, we will have to re-engineer, restructure, reconsider that public institution without taking away its vitality. We must take away the viciousness that has been injected to it for commercial reasons, for political reasons, or a host of other things.
Mr.
But
Khurshid,
a re-examination is called for.
Mr. Khurshid, one of the problems of the political class is that they succumb to the blackmail. It's a public knowledge. Only now we have documentary, evidence, video evidence of what has happened. But this has been talked about for a long time. Paid news, and during elections, what you people face with the media coming and demanding. Politicians also succumb to these kind of demands very easily. Because that's the easiest way out, is it?
Of course, politicians succumb to it because there's a culture in politics that you don't take on everybody at the same time, and it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing. A politician should not have to survive at any cost. I do accept that the politician has to be different from many other professions. A politician, for instance, is not like a priest. A politician is not like a teacher. A politician may have a little bit of everyone, but a politician is a politician.
And he has to set a higher standard.
Lines drawn for a politician for
He has to set a higher
Of
standard.
course you have to set a higher standards. Absolutely, undoubtedly you have to. Undoubtedly you have to set higher standards. But when you set higher standards, you must be judged by high standards. You must not be judged by low standards of lowly people. And I think that therefore, a need for a dialogue, debate and a reconstructive surgery in order to put our society back on track of sanity, I think is called for.
Okay, Bharat, quickly. Self-regulation. He spoke of self-regulation. We have discussed enough about self-regulation. Is the media ready for self-regulation? Will it be effective
What
at
is
all?
the problem with the media first? I think there are three problems with the media. One,
Quickly.
large sections of big media today, it represents corporate interests.
Right.
The second thing that has happened is that the wall between editorial control, editorial content and advertising has been obliterated by big media,
Absolutely.
media leaders. And the third thing that has happened is that expansion in the media has gone hand in hand with the a fallen reputation of the media, with bad practices. And the media wants to hold politicians by a certain standard, but doesn't want to hold itself by the same standards.
Right.
So yes, regulation is necessary, but when you say self-regulation, who's the self?
Who is the self?
This self is newspaper owners. Is it the journalists? Is it self means the reader whom you're servicing? So we have to define, what do we mean by self-regulation? Because other forms of regulation, such as those we have in this society, are virtually failed. After all, the Press Council of India refused to put the original report of paid news on its site.
Absolutely.
And only when the EC, Election Commission, ordered, and you got a new chairman in Justice Karju, that a censored version was put on the site.
Right.
So, in the name of self-regulation, your Press Council of India, which is a toothless body,
yeah.
and which is today run by somebody who wants enormous amounts of punitive powers. I'm not for that either. But equally, this business of self-regulation becomes an excuse for no regulation at all.
Okay, Professor Mukherjee, last words to you. Media's role.
No, I would like to say that what you need is the strengthening of institutions,
Yes.
which will enable and help media, politicians, bureaucrats, all different aspects of society to become better.
Right.
I don't think we can expect miracles overnight, but I would say that the Rajat Gupta case
Right.
shows if your judiciary is strong, if it has an ability to deliver, if it has certain values, it will act as an institution that enables, that actually rewards certain kind of behavior and punishes others. Secondly, I would say the electoral system needs to be reformed. And I think politicians perhaps will be the greatest beneficiaries. They should go for it first.
Absolutely.
Because there are a lot of politicians out there who want to be honest, but they can't.
Okay.
Because the whole system is like that.
On that hopeful note, we will end this show. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Salman Khurshid, Seshadri Chari, Bharat Bhushan and Professor Mridula Mukherjee. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture, same time on Monday.